I would appreciate if as we move along, kama sauti yangu itakuwa inawafikia, you can be able to tell me so that I can be able to actually see if we can to pick it up. I'm realizing there been some there's been issues
Excuse me.
that I've just had, na kama sisi itakuja ibidi tutafute namna ya kurekebisha hiyo pamoja.
Yeah, excuse.
Now, I want us to be able to talk about what we discussed previously. And the reason why I want us to be able to talk about it is because it will us in largely on track, so to exactly where are we from, where are we going to. Now, when we were talking about production, I remember us talking about stage production. And as we were talking about these stages of production, I remember us talking about the 3 stages of production of thought. And we also have the 5 stages of production, school of thought. There are 2 schools of thought. That one, there's one which believes we only have one particular, there's one particular school of thought believes that we only have 3 stages. That's pre-production, production, then we have post-production. So with this particular school of thought, believe that we have pre-production, we have post-production. Then this other school of thought believes that we normally have development, we have pre-production, we have production, we have post-production, and we have distribution and sales. So this is how 5 thought actually comes in. Now I would request Wanjiku to switch microphone. So I'm trying to say, Kevin, am I clear now? Kevin? So we were saying that there are 2 schools of thought, that there's one school of thought that actually believes kuna hatua 3 ambazo achukue kabla patie program ambayo tunaweza tukakaa nyumbani tukaiangalia, kama video ma DVD ambayo tunaweza tukakaa na tukaiwatch. And there's another school of thought that believes we have basically 5 stages of action, na hizi hatua 5 za uzalishaji wa vipindi, hao watu wanapiga kwamba production through development, pre-production, production, post-production, then you shall have distribution and sales. Now, when you look at these two schools of thought, you'll get that scripting is basically at the pre-production of the three stages of production, and it will also fall under development for those that have 5 stages of production. And the reason why it falls at that part of the production is because the script is regarded as the it's basically regarded as um, it's basically regarded as the foundation. It's basically regarded as that particular guideline, that particular blueprint, ile map ambayo itakutoa kama ni Nairobi ikupeleke Thika, Thika ipeleke Nanyuki, kutoe Nanyuki ikurudi Nairobi. That's what the script does. And that's why I want us to be able to spend a lot of time so that we can be able to understand exactly what normally happens. So after understanding the 3 phases, then the next thing that we talked about was that in production, you really come with the idea. You generate. Now, the moment you generate idea, the next thing you need to be able to think about is, before you think now coming up with a script, after understanding the stages of production, you need now to solve what kind of idea, what kind of production am I going to make. Now, the moment you think of a drama program, the moment you of an interview program, the moment you think about a music show program, the moment you think about a news program, always think of an idea. You generate an idea. Now, ideas can be generated out of one's research. You can do your research, come up with an idea. People can go through experiences, and these particular experiences are the ones to be able to ideas. Because normally that people undergo so much, and when they undergo so much, which go through, they are able now to be able to turn them into stories that they can be able to tell. Now, when you look into a movie like South Africa, the South Africans had actually undergo a lot of hard in South Africa, and they could not be able to make it in anymore. People like Humar made a decision to be able to read a script, that particular script that will be able to change the way South Africans were looking into themselves and the way they were looking into people within South Africa. And they wanted to be able to say it's freedom. And when you watch that particular freedom, you get to that it's a movie that actually liberated a lot of South Africa, either emotionally or sometimes even economically. So when you come to such of personal experiences, it will be able to help you a lot in terms of how you're going to generate. Sometimes it can happen as a result of watching and looking into the media. Now, it does happen that some of us we like watching other media. Probably it's very possible you're working for Citizen TV, but again, there's a particular program on KBC TV. There's a particular program on NT. There's a particular program on KTN, and this program they will be able to do is they will enrich the scope of your ideas. In the moment you enrich the scope of ideas, you're likely now to be able to generate a lot of ideas. Let me give an example. KBC did happen with the media house in the country, and the KBC was the first media house to country, it had programs like it had such kind of programs. So what did happen to these other media houses? They are basically looked into how do we work on programs that are closely related to what the Kamani is. So what they have basically done is to be able to with similar programs. For example, we have Yocha Makamani on KPC. Which other program do we have that is closely related to Yocha Makamani on other media houses? And
Yes.
I'm saying KP wako na Viocha Mahakamani.
Yeah.
Kuna TV station nyingine ambayo iko na kipindi ambacho chakaribia Viocha Mahakamani.
No, not sure.
Umewahi kuona kipindi ambacho kinaitwa Mashtaka?
Mahakamani peke yake.
Yeah, Viocha Mahakamani iko KBC. Umewahi angalia
Yeah.
K24? Umewahi angalia Citizen?
No.
Yeah, you have been watching this.
Yes.
You watch this particular TV, ndio?
Yeah.
Kuna kipindi ambacho kinaitwa Mashtaka. Kinakuwa wapi?
Mashaka.
Mashtaka.
Yeah.
Inakuwa kwa TV gani?
KTN, I bet.
Now I want to give you that as an assignment. Uende utafute.
Sawa.
Mashtaka kinakuwa wapi. So what I'm trying to is that normally we generate ideas on programs that we can be able to produce, we as producers, and need to realize that you can do research, come up with an idea of the program that you want to produce. Sometimes we can undergo even experiences, and those experiences can be able to form us on the kind of programs that we can be able to produce, the kind of ideas that we can actually produce. And again, we are saying you can also have a feel of what other media houses are doing. And that's why I'm giving an example of Vioja on KPC. Then we have Mastaka, which is another program that has been produced by another media house. And when that happens, you have to realize that other media can inform you idea that can work on. So these are things that you need to be able to look into and see. How do you generate what? Ideas. So once you have those particular ideas like uko nazo na kwa mkono, the next thing that you're supposed to do is actually to look at a story. Now the story is what you'll be able to use to drive your idea forward. Every program has a particular lesson that it would want to teach the audience. There's no way we can be taught that particular lesson if there's no story that carries that particular lesson forward.
You are currently the only person in this conference.
Let's take an example. It might happen that you are watching. It might happen that you're actually you're actually on a given media house. You get to realize that in Kenya people are suffering, and the reason they are suffering is because probably there is lack of food, or probably the reason why suffering is because there is no employment, or probably the reason why they are suffering is because there is very poor leadership that we have in the country. So the best thing that you can be able to do is for you to now make a decision. Is it poor leadership that we have a country? So what happened at a particular time is now to think of actually that can be able to teach people that it is because of poor leadership that we Kenyans are actually suffering. So how do you work on that? Now you have the characters, you have the place or location or scene, and have now the story that will people take place in that particular location, place, and that is going to involve now the characters or the people that you have. That's how it's to move forward. So let me take you through on what can happen if you have a story. I hope you know what we have on the screen.
Yeah.
You
Yeah.
see what we have on? Okay. So now once we have this, let me tell you in particular story. Sometimes this is thing that we are in mathematics classes, and we work out graphs. We need to realize that even stories actually have what graphs, and I want to indicate. I mean to use this a story graph. This will actually be 0 here. This will be 1 here. This will be 2 here. This will be 3 here. This will be 4 here. This will be 5 somewhere there. Then we have 1 here. Then we have 2 somewhere here. We have 3 somewhere here. And we have 4 somewhere here. Now, what we have on our screen, and is that X or is it a Y-axis?
Y-axis.
A Y-axis. So this is Y, and this is going to be X. So the moment we have X and Y axis here, which one is independent? Which one is dependent?
Pardon?
Which one is independent of the two, X and Y? Which one is dependent?
Dependent.
Independent.
Or Y.
Y is independent. You are right. So this one is going to be, this one is actually independent here. It is on the Y. So what will happen now, in particular story, will actually be depending on time. So this will be time. Time is also independent. And what we'll have here is we will be able to have actions. So we shall be able to have actions here. So the actions here will actually depend on the time that will be here. So if something happens, it will depend as in how does time move from the beginning all the way to the end. So what we are trying to do is, if something starts to happen today, and we say now, here are the 1, the 2, the 3, the 4, the 5 are days. Today will happen, and we'll wait for tomorrow. Something again will happen. Then we'll wait for the other day. That's something to happen until we get to finish with the 5 days straight up. And what will be happening is what will be able to have the actions idea. Probably today we'll be able to eat. Tomorrow tomorrow we will be able, so this will be somewhere here. Tomorrow what will happen is we will be able to have a discussion about one or two things. Then the day after tomorrow, we agree on where we are going. Then on the fourth day, we agree now when to peak, then something like that. So you'll get to realize that this is something that is going to go along this like that. So the story is to follow this particular what graph. This normally happens if we have the beginning, we have the middle, and we have the end of that story. That these three things must happen within particular story. And these three will only happen if the story will be beginning from day 1, day 2, day 3, 4, day 5, or the first minute, second minute, third minute, fourth minute, fifth minute, or year 1, year 2, year 3, year 4, or year 5. And as things will be happening, time will also be moving. And in high school, in primary school, we are told any particular story must have the beginning, the middle, and the end. So, but when it comes to scripting, we normally say the story has the beginning, the middle, and the end. There is what you call how a story moves from the beginning to the end. And what normally happens is we'll normally say we will have the introduction, then we will have the conflict, we'll have the conflict, we have the rising action, then we'll have the climax, then we shall be able to have the falling action, and finally we shall be able to have the resolution. Now, what happens is that when you talk about the intro is basically where you tell us about who is in the city.
I'm sorry, I can't hear anything.
You're not hearing?
Yeah,
You're getting now?
yeah, now I'm okay.
And you're seeing what I'm writing on the screen?
Yes?
Are you seeing what I'm writing on the screen?
Yeah.
Okay. What I'm trying to say is that when you are developing a story, you do want a script about. In high school, we remember I told you that your story must have the beginning, middle, and the end, or the introduction, the end, the conclusion. That's how I told the story must be. But when we talk about scripting, we need to be able to understand that a story will have that introduction, the body, and the conclusion, but all those things have to be broken down into what we have on the screen. That introduction, the conflict, action, the climax, the action to be able to have the resolution, which will be at the end of that particular story. And the resolution is not basically the end of the story. The resolution can be the beginning of another story. So what will happen is we need to be able to understand this thing we're calling the intro, the conflict, the rising action, the climax, the falling on, and the resolution. Now that's why I'm saying that when you talk about intro is basically where you tell about who is in the story, where is the story, what is the story about, what is the story about, when is this story happening, and you sometimes even tell us why it's not, why it's happening. And you look into this to be it's one particular question that we do not want to tackle at this particular point. That's how. It will revolve around these questions. That's who is in the story, where is the story, what is the story about, when is the story happening, and why is it happening? Are we there?
Yeah.
But we will avoid about what I mean about how. And how I'm going to show you where we'll be able to tackle now the question how. Now, when you do that particular introduction, then you need now to be able to take us into the content. When you do the introduction, ni kama kwa mtungi yametulia, mtu ameuza. Now, when you have done that particular introduction, the next thing that is going to happen is you must start that calm voice so that the story now can be able to begin and move from that particular point to another or to a particular direction. So what this means therefore is that a conflict is when something happens that is going to disturb the normal way of how things have been. Example, let us say where minute. Okay, Wanjiku, welcome.
Thank you.
You seem to be having a trouble with your network.
Yeah.
So I was saying that when you're telling us, when you're doing that particular introduction, you are actually showing us how things are on the ground. Everything was at its normal position. Now, for the story to move, you need to be able to give us something that's going to change the direction of the story. So things can start happening and the story now can be able to move forward. And that's when we have or we will to have called the conflict. And at this particular point,
You are currently the only person in this conference.
conflict could be area where, if you allow me to use this particular example, Anne Wanjiku and Kevin Indunda are actually classes. There's nothing that they have seen in one another. They have been just like that, good classmates. Then it does happen that one particular morning, sees a phone belongs to one Wanjiku, and they actually take the phone out and realizing that. And what's going to happen is now Wanjiku decides to follow up and see who took the particular phone away from her. So when she makes the decision to follow or probably do investigations, that becomes now a changed direction of the story. Something that we need now to be able to know and understand which particular direction it's going to take. And uko sawa?
Yeah.
Kuna mtu
Yes.
kuna mtu
It was a call. Yeah.
So what I was saying is, Kevin Ndunda
Yes.
and last a very class, coming to class, going to the evening, coming and also going to the evening. That's the normal way of things are for these two individuals. That's Anne Wanjiku and Kevin Ndunda. Now, when things like that, something is going to happen that is going to disrupt how things are. What is this? This thing that this particular phone that Anne has, and the cat is going to take to steal it. Now that becomes the conflict. How does it become the conflict? A conflict because we have been knowing that Anne Wanjiku and Ndunda are friends and classmates in class. And when now Kevin Ndunda, this example, thing, Sisemi Kevin Ndunda means when it does happen, Kevin Ndunda is to steal that particular phone. That becomes now the conflict that is going to disturb the relationship the two has, Ndunda and Wanjiku. So when it disturbs that particular relationship, then some things are going to happen that are going to take the story forward. Now, when things have to go forward, that's when we have the rising action. The rising action is what shall be able to tackle the question: how does Anne Wanjiku try to recover her phone that was stolen by Kevin Ndunda? That's what we shall be able to have. So the conflict will give disrupts the normalcy. What disrupts the normalcy? And when we talk about the rising action, when we talk about the rising action, this is basically the how the story moves forward. It's the how the story moves forward. So that becomes now the rising action. Now, when you talk about the climax is when now Anne Wanjiku is going to do. What objective of the objective of the story is that you steal somebody's if you steal this product or property, when you will be caught up with the law, you will suffer for them. The climax will be when the phone is recovered, when that particular phone is recovered, and this pin is when that uncovered from Kevin Indunda, and he is actually probably could be jailed, or it could actually be pained by mob justice. When that happens, then that becomes now the climax is an achievement that was actually the intended objective of that story. Then once that is done, then things try to go back to normal. When you're going back to normal, we're going back, that's what we call now the falling action. That's how. And when we have these things have normalized, by the way, you realize that things will never go back to, because Anu Wanjiku and Kevin, as much as they were best friends, this time round they're not going to be their best friends, and that's why things will never be
The
how
same.
they were initially. Yeah, they will not be the same. So when they are trying to know what will be the resolution, the solution is probably now for us to learn, starting to trust people in different ways. And Wanjiku said Kevin in that she can to place her phone, and that particular phone will not be there. But now that Nunda has actually proved he cannot look into that particular phone and leave that, we need to be able to treat people in different ways. That's what we shall be able to have as the result. So that's how you arrange any particular story that you are going to want. Just have the intro, then we will be able to move to the conflict. Then from the conflict, we'll be able to have the rising action. From the we'll to have the climax. From the climax, we shall go to the falling action, and from the falling action, we shall finally have the solution. So on that graph, we're going to have that particular standard graph. That's how it's going to look like. Allow me to use the screen again. So this is the graph. This is how it's going to be up to that particular point. Then we will be able to have it. And story starts from zero. No story that can people from zero at all. Hakuna story inaweza anza from zero. So we'll be able to have a story that is going. We are going to have the introduction somewhere there up to that particular point. Then we are going to have a conflict, and that particular conflict is going to change the state, and it's able to take there the rising action. Then we are going to have the climax there, where it to be flat at the apex there. Then we are going to have the falling action like that. Then we are going to have resolution. So at this particular point, we are going to have the resolution. This is the resolution. At a particular point here, this will be the action. At this apex part here, we are going to have the climax. That will be the climax there. Then here we are going to have the rising action. This is actually the rising action. Then right here we have the conflict kwa hako kakona, kwa sababu hako ndiko kalidisturb tu zikaanza kukua tofauti. That's the conflict. Then equal kwa hili ponde hapa, we shall be able to have the introduction. We'll be able to have introduction there. As you realize, like we are saying, this is independent axis, we'll have 1 there, we have 2 there, we have 3 there, we'll have 4 there, we have 5. Then on this particular end here, we are going to have 1, we are going to have 2, we'll have 3, we are going to have 4 there. So these things are going to happen. The story will begin from this point here. It will be shown that you're a student in class. Probably this is going to be a first year, second semester class. As you will be in class, things will be introduced. Labda mtakuwa class pamoja, mmetoka class mnaenda for lunch pamoja, mnarudi mnaingia kusoma pamoja. Then at a point in time unawekelea yako, unatoka, alafu ukishatoka nje, then anatoka na phone yako. Then at this particular point you watch the picture at this particular point here. We have this particular when we have this particular conflict, phone imeipiwa, then labda utareport kwa police waanza investigations, ama utaenda kwa security ya shule ureport. Ukisha report wafanye investigations, na wewe utakuwa unafanya investigations. Kevin anakutoroka na wewe unajaribu kumfuatilia, kwa sababu yeye ndio mtu wa mwisho mlikuwa pamoja before hiyo simu yako iwe. Watu wengine watakuwa wanakuja wanakwambia vile Kevin ni mbaya, wengine watakuwa wanakuja wanakwambia vile Kevin ni mzuri. Siku moja Kevin anakupeleka out for lunch, unajua it's one way or the other, inatoka hapa ikirudi hapa, ikiendelea hivyo inapanda juu ya mlimani. Kapofika hapa, we shall be the climax. This is where now inakujulikana wazi ya kwamba Kevin kwa yeye ndiye alikuwa amekuipia simu yako, imepatikana nyumbani kwao, na ikishapatikana nyumbani kwao iko na line yake ile ambayo watu. So at this point now ikipatikana hivyo, then he will be taken to police. Kishachukuliwa polisi, ama kishakuza shule, that will be the following action. Now what will be the resolution? Resolution will be for us to learn really wizi ni mbaya, mwenzako ambaye mna pamoja. So this is something actually that you need to be able to learn to. Every particular story needs to be able to follow this particular structure so that you can be able to move forward. Just a minute. that's how the story should be looking like from the beginning to the end. So if your story does not really have this particular arc, then that particular story is not a story that you can. So when this happens, sometimes you see people who tell stories that are actually in this particular way. This is the x-axis. Then you get to realize that there is somebody who tells a story. Ikianza, you feel this story is a good story, and the story starts going and you lose interest on that particular story. If you have a story that is happening, then that's one of the reasons why probably your story becomes much boring, and you need to be able to change the how you tell stories. And mostly with them with the Kenyan whether you're talking about drama productions, you're talking about any kind of program production, you'll get to realize that the reason why we have very few listeners and viewers of programs is because we have not learned the art of telling stories, and how we tell stories now makes people lose interest from the beginning. There is something good here in relation to this particular story. At this particular point here, we tell our story, the introduction part. Tunasema hiyo story, it's a good story. It's a good story. So after that has been done like that, they get to realize that people lose interest. Why? Because you did not take the story you want your story downwards. Why? Because your way of the story did not conform to the graph that we have just downward generated here, so that you can have the introduction, the conflict, the rising action, the climax, the falling action, then we have the result. And some of us are people who tell stories that are very flat. Mtu anakuambia story kutoka mwanzo the way to end, unasikia hakuna mahali inaenda. Alianza hapa, hiyo story inakia hivyo, inakia hivyo. Kuna wakati unafili inataka kusonga na inarudi. That's such kind of stories are boring stories. Those are flat stories that we should avoid as we can, so that we don't them. So that's one of the areas that we need to be able to look into.